Shalom. Thanks for joining today. This story is called Squanto, and I'm going to start it a little bit different. I'm going to start out with the scripture verses first. Um, Isaiah says, "For since the beginning of the world, men have not heard, nor perceived by the ear, neither hath the eye seen, O Jehovah, besides thee, what he hath prepared for him that waiteth for him." And in First Corinthians 2:9, Paul says, "But it is written," and he's referring back to Isaiah, "I have not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things which Jehovah hath prepared for men that love him." Now, the reason why I started it this way is because there were things that happened in this story that from the beginning to the end, I just wouldn't have, it hadn't entered my mind that those things could happen. Okay. So, okay, to start, it was a Saturday in November in 2006. And we were just about to leave home. We lived in Morenci, Michigan then, for the 2 hour drive to Detroit for our annual family harvest dinner from my mom's side of the family. Now, in previous years, this dinner had been held on Thanksgiving. However, there was a number of relatives that couldn't come or didn't arrive till late because they had to attend Thanksgiving dinners with either their spouses, family, cousins, kinfolks, or people from the other side of the family. But I tell you, before this family harvest dinner was changed to late October, early November, Thanksgiving was excruciating long day for our immediate family. In that immediate family, I'm talking about me and Floyd and Winston and Zoe. The routine started with roasted duck breakfast at my dad's mother's house on the west side of Detroit. All right. So then we went to the family harvest dinner that was about 35 miles north. Then back to the west side of Detroit to Floyd's mother's house for a family dinner with her siblings. And then on to Judy, that was Floyd's sister's house, for another dinner. Now, Judy's husband always insisted on her cooking a full dinner at their house because of the leftovers. So that she came to her mother's house later after we had come to her house. Okay. Then we traveled another few miles to go to Frances' house. That was my father's cousin for another dinner, and it was mostly desserts. Frances' husband, Leonard, he could throw down on some 7 Up cakes, sweet potato pies. But when the day was over, we were full as ticks and very tired. Now, as an aside, I never paid much mind to the phrase full as a tick because I didn't really know what a tick was living up in Detroit, other than maybe I see a picture of it. However, when we moved to Alabama in 2008, we all got bit by ticks. The cats, the dogs got bit too. And the fattest ticks were on the animals because they couldn't readily get them off. But we'd see them on there, we'd get them off. And the ticks looked like to me, by the time they suck your blood, they had swole up 10 times their normal size. Okay, but I digress. Let's get back to the story. All right. So we're getting ready to go to Detroit from Morenci for this harvest dinner. So everybody was in the driveway except me. I was still in the house getting ready to come down, and they were getting ready to get in the minivan. And then I heard some commotion outside, and I heard Floyd yelling, "Sharon, Sharon, come quick! Squanto is down." So I hurried, through the kitchen and out the back door, and I could see it was all white Nubian goat. Squanto was in a heap on the ground. Winston was 8 and Zoe was 7. They were quite upset, and Floyd was perplexed, wondering what to do. I was the country person among them. Floyd and I were both born in Detroit, and we moved to the country because we wanted an open, safe space to raise our children. And but Floyd was still very much city-fied. Okay, I had embraced the country life totally. Okay, and if this was before we knew about eating biblically clean, I had approached Floyd by getting the local police, getting on their roadkill list. Floyd was horrified. He said, "You must be mad. Do you know how long that meat been on the ground, and then you're gonna eat it?" And so I said, "Well, Floyd, we'll only take the meat in the wintertime. That way, if it's on the road for a while, it'll probably be frozen, and we can get it ground up for hamburger and meatloaf." Floyd said, Sharon, you crazy. I wish I would eat some meat off the road. Okay, so you get idea between me and Floyd about this whole country living. Okay, so no, back to the scene was Squanto. I looked at Squanto and saw that his right hind leg was bleeding. And Floyd and I went into the house. I took off my fake fur and my heels and my Sunday go to meeting dress, and I put on some work clothes, and we lifted Squanto and slid him into onto no, we slid him on a tarp, and then we lifted him into the back of the van. He was a full size. He was a heavy goat. He probably weighed about 100 pounds. Winston and Zoe were very attentive to their beloved goat, and we had other goats too. All right, but this was the one that was the biggest one at the time that we had, and I think that secretly they would get on that goat and they would ride Squanto. Okay, so Zoe kept Squanto calm by rubbing him and scratching in between his horns and stuff. So when the vet said it looked like an injury from trying to jump over the fence, and he got his leg caught because we had high fences around it to try to keep the goats in. But goats are notorious drunk jumpers, okay? So she gave an injection and sent us home with 4 more daily injections to be given under the skin on his neck. And she also instructed us to change the bandage daily. Now, if you've been following this story, you know who was giving the shots and changing the bandages. That was me, okay? So we had to cut our trip to Detroit short. We had planned to stay there for 3 days, but now we had to be back after only one night. The shots went well, and the leg started to heal. And after the last shot, I left the bandage on for 2 days instead of daily changing it. So when I came back to look at the leg on the 6th day, it was turning black and had an awful smell. And I yelled for the troops, Floyd, Winston, and Zoe coming, and we're going to put Squanto in the van and take him back up to the vet. When I went in the house to get my purse, I, okay, I hurriedly called the meat processor. Okay, I wasn't intending to let all that meat go to waste. All right, I'm just saying I had embraced country life, so I wanted to have my ducks in a row if that was gangrene, and if gangrene turned out to be localized and not systemic, running all the way through his body. By the time I got to the van, Winston and Zoe would plead, Mama, can we get a leg for Squanto? I tried to be calm and realized that this was their pet, but no way was I going to pay for a prosthesis, okay? Plus, I had bigger concerns on my mind, trying to convince Floyd to eat Squanto, okay? So I calmly and quietly said, so that Winston and Zoe couldn't hear, I wonder if gangrene is localized or systemic. Because if it's localized, I've already called Pettisville Meats, and they said they could process it if we shoot it first. Okay. Boy spun around in the seat, and he had a wild look in his eyes, like he couldn't even believe I married this woman. I can't even believe I know somebody like this. Okay. He said, you have to be out your mind. I ain't eating no gangrene goat. Okay. I said, we don't know for sure that the gangrene is running through his blood. Boy said, listen, gangrene or not, I'm not eating that goat. Okay. Floyd and I voices had gotten up, the decibels had gone up a few, it crescendoed, okay. So Winston and Zoe were panicking by that time. Mama, we can't eat Squanto. Okay. Floyd lowered his voice and said in a very citified finality, if you take that goat to Pettisville Meats, I will never eat your ground meat again as long as I live. Okay, so I sighed and said, that's it. This was hopeless with Floyd, so we ain't eating Squanto, okay? Now to deal with the prosthesis. So I told the kids it'd probably be too expensive, but we would see what the vet had to say. So the vet came to the back of the van and examined Squanto, and she confirmed that Squanto had gangrene. And yes, it was running all the way through Squanto's body. Floyd looked at me like I was a nutcase, and he was the only sane person in the family. He had never said so, but he never would have purchased a goat prosthesis, okay? But during that conversation, he remained quiet and non-committal and let me take the heat from Winston and Zoe, okay? Well, with some reservation, I asked about the prosthesis. So I exhaled deeply with relief when the vet said there was no goat prostheses. And the kids were really sad. She said there was no guarantee also that amputating the leg would solve the problem. She had known cases where the gangrene, you cut off one part and then you had to cut off some more and you had to cut off some more because it just kept going. And there was no hope that the goat would survive. Now, my son, I did talk to him this morning and asking him about some of what he felt during that time. But he was really, remember, he was 8 and he's like 26 now. So he said he was sad because he thought that there really were prostheses for animals. Okay. And some years later, after this occurred, I did see a goat with a prosthesis on the internet. Okay. But at the time, we were in a little country town, and if they were available, she wasn't aware that they were available. Okay. So I asked how much would it cost to put the goat down and dispose of him. But Winston Zora was yelling some nonsense about taking him home for burial. Okay. So the vet said $35. Now I thought that was way too much because I could get my friend Jim to shoot him and drag him out in the back of his pasture for less than that. So I told the vet my plan and she agreed, and she knew Jim. Okay. So now you get the flavor of what's to follow. I'll do my best to describe Jim. Jim was born in the country, loved the country, and believed he could do most anything. He's adventurous, willing to take risks, and he loves animals. I think he was living on his grandfather's farm that had been passed down to him through his father. He had a farm with chickens, turkeys, horses, and rabbits. He was mixed breeding Jack Russells and Chihuahuas, okay, as well as raising another odd assortment of dogs. Jim once came to my house with a live trap and caught a raccoon and took him home and put him on his dining room table to try to raise him. Okay. But the raccoon got too scrappy. And so he finally had to put him outside. So now, how I met Jim, I had a bunch of chickens that were running wild all over my property. Okay. Because I couldn't keep them fenced in and they would roost some places high sometimes and I just couldn't get to them. They were eating the cat's food and they were, making droppings all over the play areas where the kids were. So I put an ad in the paper that said, if you can catch them, you can have them. Okay. So Jim showed up to survey the situation because he only lived about a mile up the road. And then he came back that evening while the chickens were roosting and caught 6 of the 7 chickens. Okay. Sometime later, I put an ad in the paper for some dead trees that's on my property. You cut them, haul them, and you can have them. Okay. Jim showed up. Jim was in his late 30s. He had red hair and a red beard. He wore mostly overalls. And he was a people person, like me. And neither one of us had any racial prejudice. He was white and I'm black. And I never liked those particular labels, especially when you're talking about people's color. He was a shade of like a pinkish beige, and I'm a light brown. But in the sun, we both turned red. Okay, so we liked each other. Okay, and he got along with our family. Floyd liked him, and he was like our go-to person. And when things needed to be done around the farm that we didn't know how to handle. Jim also didn't believe in unnecessary expenditure of money. When I first met Jim, he was missing several teeth in the front of his mouth, 4 or 5, I think. He was missing some. And a couple of years later, he stopped by because we knew him over time. A couple of years later, he stopped by the farm and told me he was going to Tennessee. So reason why I wasn't going to see him too much to get some teeth. And they had some kind of free program down there that if you were there for a month or so, you get free teeth. And after a while, Jim showed back up and he had teeth. Okay. So now back to the vet. We closed the hutch on the van and we drove to Jim's farm. Jim wasn't home, so we left Squanto tied to a tree and with a note on Jim's door. The note said, Dear Jim, Squanto has gangrene. Please shoot him and put him in your pasture. Here's $10. If you need more, please call me. Sharon. Okay, we said our goodbyes to Squanto and left. Now, Winston said he was really sad when we had to leave Squanto there. Zoe said that she kind of resolved it, that was the last that she was going to see Squanto. I was a bit relieved because I realized there was nothing more that I could do. And Floyd was probably elated and relieved that he wasn't going to hear no more conversation from me about eating a gangrene goat. Okay. So, about 2 hours later, Jim called and he said, Sharon, I can save Squanto. I said, what you mean save him? He said, operate on him. I said, Floyd, get on the phone. Jim said he can save Squanto. Okay, when Floyd got on the phone, Jim went on to say that he believed he could amputate the leg and care for him. He said, I've seen deer in the woods with 3 legs and no one was caring for them. He said, I had a chicken that lost a leg and I took a gun shell and made a prosthesis for it. It's walking around all right. I was nearly convinced. I just needed a few more details. Jim, what are you going to use to cut the leg? He said, my sawzall. Now, for my city readers, a sawzall is an electric saw that the blade is so finely tuned that it can cut through steel, wood, anything. It definitely can cut through bone. Okay. So I said, well, what are you going to use as an antibiotic after the surgery? He said, I had 10 vials of penicillin left from a horse that was sick. I said, what about the anesthesia? He said, I'm going to work fast. Okay. Floyd's only comment during this whole conversation was, Sharon, you go on over there and hold the goat down for Jim. Okay. So Jim said cheerily, because he knew Floyd, that he had a friend over there that was helping. Okay. So I said, well, go on and do it, and we'll be praying on this end. Now, Jim's girlfriend was a nurse. And Jim was so pumped up about the surgery that he called her on her job, okay? And she was horrified. He called her, Jim, you can't use a sawzall to do surgery. The goat might get infected. But Dr. Jim, as he began to call himself, had the answer for that. He said, I'm going to use a new blade, okay? Meanwhile, back at our house, we were praying for Jim and Squanto. After an hour, we called Jim. He said the operation was a success. He really yelled when I cut him. My friend nearly passed out from the goat yelling in the blood, but Squanto was fine. The whole procedure only took 2 minutes from cutting to band-aid. Squanto was so relieved to have that leg not touching the ground and hurting that when it was over, he followed me back to the house. We were elated, especially Winston and Zoe. After a couple of days, we went to see Squanto. He looked fine. I took some comfrey leaves from my garden to wrap up the wound so it would heal faster, and it did work. Now, near the end of the 10 days, remember the 10 vials of penicillin, I began to think about bringing Squanto home. Then the realization hit me almost like a ton of bricks. Cold of the hills is that I took Squanto to Jim to kill. Jim saved him. So now Squanto is Jim's goat. On top of that, Dr. Jim was getting a lot of notoriety out of this amazing feat of surgery. People were actually driving by to see the 3-legged goat. Okay, I'm going to tell you, sometimes I'm amazed at some of the things the Father has allowed me to go through. Because I tell you, this story, if somebody told me, I had to be looking kind of cockeyed at them, well, like, is this for real? Because I couldn't have made up this story, okay? But anyway, so I knew the goat was going to be Jim's at that time. But with little hope, with very little hope, I called Jim. And he confirmed the code of the hills. And he said he'd have to think about selling Squanto back to me, okay? Selling it back to me, okay? However, several things were working in my favor. It was the winter holidays, and after all that merriment, Jim's, his high on this might wear off because Jim only had that one goat. He had gotten rid of all out of the goat raising business when he originally sold Squanto and some other goats to me. So I figured I'm just gonna bide my time. Sure enough, in January, Jim sold Squanto back to me for $50. That was the price of the vials of penicillin and the hay that he had eaten. Squanto was healthy, lively, and ran with the other goats for 2 years while we were still on that farm. We were all happy and amazed at the blessings that was like the eyes not seen, ears not heard that Father gave us. And Squanto, by the way. All right. Now, right before we moved from Michigan, we were Michigan, and we moved to Alabama in 2008. We had a farm auction, and the auctioneers ran a newspaper ad and internet ads, and the ad said everything for sale: real estate, artwork, and a 3-legged goat. And it was about 200 people showed up for the auction because where we were out in the country, if somebody was selling stuff on the farm and it was neighbor or it was the neighbor of a friend of a neighbor or something like that, people showed up. And so it was more than 200 people that showed up, and 123 people actually got the bid numbers on the paddles that you would raise up, because when the auction is auction, you hold up your number. Okay, so they had given out 123 of those had signed up for. And so we had a food wagon, we had a porta potty, we had two simultaneous auctioneers, one on this side of the farm, one on the other side of the farm. Oh, it was a great time, especially to see everybody and neighbors and friends. We had fun, we made money, we was able to say goodbye to people, and we were able to see people we hadn't seen in a long time. And one of the auctioneer's wives bought the goat for $20, and she brought him for a pet for her 10-year-old son. I was really hoping she hadn't bought him to eat, because a lot of people in the country they do eat them. And we had fun that day. And some of the other things you just might be interested in what we sold. We had a nanny goat that the night before the auction had triplets, and that's not too frequent. And they sold for 52.50, all four of them. I had a nanny goat and a 1 week old kid, and that sold those two sold for $35. I had another nanny goat that sold for 20. I had a Rhode Island red rooster that sold for $9. I had a boar's head, pig boar's head that was mounted like as a trophy, that sold for $100. And I also had a broken painted carousel horse that sold for $160. So we did good that day. And I wonder about Squanto. I don't know how long goats live, but when the auctioneer's wife bought him, he was in good shape, and we had much fun with Squanto. Thank you so much for listening, and please remember to like and share and subscribe if you haven't. Shalom.